Welcome to the moonlight of Emuna, Parshas Toldos. This week's learning should be a schus for Fushlim for Chana Mashbas Vilcha, Shmuel Shazam, Bechav Menachem Mordechai Ben Afira, Michaim Ben Sarah, Lenishmas Heni Basechiel Mechel, and Ratza Bas Menachem Mendel. So we're introduced at the beginning of the parsha. We're told about Yitzchak and Rivka having difficulty having children, and in pasuk Chaf Aleph, the third pasuk of the parsha, it says Vayeter Yitzchak la Hashem, and Yitzchak davened to Hashem, entreated Hashem lenoichach ishtay, opposite his wife, ki akarahi, because she was an akara, she was barren, ve'aser loy, and he was answered, vatar Rivka ishtay, and Rivka his wife became pregnant. And Rashi tells us on Lenoichach Ishtoi that Yitzchak davened opposite his wife. What does that mean? So Rashi says, Ze oimed bezav v'zu mispalel. One of them stood in one corner and davened, v'zu oimed bezav zu, and the other one was in the other corner. Rivka was in the opposite corner. Umispalelas. Right? That's what the Torah is telling us by Lenoichach Ishtoi. That it was that what happened was Yitzchak and Rivka were, let's say, in the same room, and one was davening in one corner, one was davening in the other corner. And the question is, they had no place else to daven, and why is it so relevant, right? Why do we need to know that that he davened, that they were davening there opposite each other? Why is that important? And they had no other space, they couldn't daven in different rooms, they couldn't daven someplace else. So the Amshinov Rabbi, the first Amshinov Rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov David of Amshinov, explains. He says the following idea. He says that we know. And this is the more famous Rashi on this pasuk, but the very next Rashi tells us, "Vayeter loy," that Yitzchak was answered. Loy v'loy la, he was answered, not her. She'ein doim tefillah tzadik ben Rasha, tefillah tzadik ben tzadik. That Yitzchak was a tzadik, and he was the son of a tzadik. Avram was a tzadik, but Rivka was a tzadikis, the daughter of a Rasha. Besuel was Rasha. Lefikach loy v'loy la. Therefore, he was answered, and not her. So says the Amshinov Rebbe, that even though this second Rashi is telling us that ultimately Yitzchak was the one who was answered, but the Noichach Ishtoi, that the fact that Yitzchak and Rivka davened opposite each other, right? What is really being explained by the following Rashi. In other words, it's explaining to us what was the attitude that Yitzchak and Rivka had when they went to daven. When Rivka goes to daven, Rivka's a tzadekis, she's sitting there davening to Hashem, please answer me, please answer our tefillas in the schus of my righteous husband Yitzchak, that he has great schusim because he's a tzaddik ben tzaddik. And when Yitzchak went to daven, he said, please Hashem, answer us in the merit of Rivka, of my tzadekis wife, that she's really the greater one, because it's not such a chiddush, it wasn't so hard for me to become a tzaddik. I was raised by Avram Avinu. But she's such a tzaddikis that she grew up in the house of Besuel, of a Rasha like Besuel, and yet she's a tzaddikis. Listen to her. Each one saw the merit in the other one, not in themselves. Rivka's looking and saying, what a tremendous tzaddik I'm married to, who comes from such a righteous family. Hashem, please answer in his merit. I may not deserve it, but he for sure deserves it. And Yitzchak has the exact opposite thought. He's sitting there saying, I grew up okay. I grew up with Avram and Sarah with my parents. Of course, it wasn't so hard for me. But look at my tzadekis of a wife who grew up in such a difficult home, and she still became a tzadekis. Each one was saying that the other one deserves to be answered. Says the Amshinov Rebbe, that's what the Torah is telling us when it says Lenoichach Ishtoi. They were davening opposite each other, meaning it's not a physical location that she was in one corner, he was in one corner. Meaning they had the opposite intentions. She's there saying, "Please answer my tefillas and my husband's tefillas because in the merit of my husband," and he's saying, "Please answer in the merit of my wife." Each one saw themselves as inconsequential next to the other one. Each one saw the beauty and the tzidkus in the other one, even though we know they were both tzaddikim. They were both, Rashi tells us, they were both tzaddikim, tzaddik ben tzaddik, tzaddik ben Rasha, but they were both tzaddikim. But each one didn't see themselves as having any merit, but they saw their spouse, they saw the other one as having all the merit to be answered. Right? So that's a lesson for us, that when we interact with other people, with our spouses, with our children, with our friends, with our family members, to always look for the good in each one. Right? Each one was looking for why the other one deserves. Not in myself. I know I have my issues. issues. I know I have things to deal with. But when I look at somebody else, instead of looking, Yitzchak didn't say, oh, Rivka, she doesn't come from a great family, so answer me. And Rivka didn't say, how much work I had to do to get here, answer me. No, each one was only looking for what was good in the other person. They weren't looking at the good that was in themselves, only what was in the other person. And now that we know we're in a time of achdus and we're trying to bring as much achdus in the world, we look at Jews who may be different than us. We need to take a moment and contemplate how they got to where they are. And maybe in so many ways they're better than us, right? You look at somebody who didn't have the benefit of your upbringing, and yet they're spiritual and they're trying to keep Torah mitzvahs, or they're trying to do good things for other Jews. We have to recognize that, and recognize that they didn't necessarily have my upbringing where chesed was part of daily life, and yet they've come to this and they've worked so hard on this. That's Yitzchak's attitude toward Rivka. And others, you see people who are maybe more sheltered in their Yiddishkeit, but we have to recognize that they also have certain benefits, certain tzidkas. And if all Jews would look at each other with what's good about the other person and how amazing the other person is based on where they come from and what they do, imagine the achdus and the tremendous change in the attitudes many people have towards other people. And that's part of real achdus, is trying to look for the good things in others. A little later on in the parsha, we have another idea that I just think is also so important. It says when Rivka is sending Yaakov in to steal the brachas from Yitzchak, from stealing them from Esav, but getting the brachas from Esav, it says, "Vatikach Rivka es bigdei Esav beno hagadol." She took the clothing of Esav, her older son, hachamudos. She took that were clean, asher ita babayis, that were with her in the house, vatalbesh es Yaakov beno hakatan, and she clothed Yaakov, her younger son. And the question is, why is the pasuk referring to Esav as Beno HaGadol and Yaakov Beno HaKatan? What is this? We know that Esav was born first. It's earlier in the parsha. We know that Esav was born first and Yaakov was born later. What's the significance of calling Esav the Gadol and Yaakov the Katan? And in general, we see that in certain times, in certain places in the Torah, certain people are referred to as HaKatan, Yaakov HaKatan, Shmuel HaKatan, David HaKatan. What is this? Katan, normally, the way in our American way of looking at things, katan is not, to be small is not usually an accolade, and yet we see that the Torah uses an accolade, and here Rivka is referring to her older son, her son who's the gadol, and her son who's the katan. So Rabbi Lazar of Koznitz, the grandson of the Koznitzer Maggid, he explains that, we have a very childish view of Esav. We tend to think of Esav as this person who never thought about anything and just gave in to everything that he wanted to do, and he was just completely evil from day one. But it's really hard to assess Esav that way. Certainly as he went through his life, he became more evil, but it's hard to understand how Esav ended up the way he did. He was brought up in the home of Yitzchak and Rivka, different than Yishmael. Yishmael, at least his mother was not Sarah Imenu. His mother was somebody else, and maybe that had an influence on him. But Esav had the exact same DNA, the exact same upbringing as Yaakov. He grew up in the house of Rivka and Yitzchak. His grandfather Avram was in his life until he was 15 years old. How did Esav become this way? Esav, certainly as the child of Rivka and Yitzchak and as the grandchild of Avram Avinu, had a very high neshama. So how did he become this way? So explains the Rabbi Lazar of Koznitz. He explains as follows. He says that really we make a mistake, because there's no reason to believe otherwise. But Esav was a very intelligent person. He had the brain of the child of Yitzchak and Rivka and the grandson of Avram and Sarah, right? And he was a deep thinker. He was a really deep thinker. So how did he become who he became? How did he seem to not follow through on that? Is that because what would happen to Esav was he would have the opportunity to do some mitzvah, and he would think, he would understand all of the pnimius, all of the Kabbalistic meanings behind the mitzvah. He would understand how a mitzvah is supposed to be done. And you have to prepare for a mitzvah, and how elevated is what happens in Shemayim when you do a certain mitzvah, right? And because of this, he would think about it. He would become overwhelmed by it. He would say, you know what? I'm never going to be able to do the mitzvah the proper way, right? So let's say he gives the example of tefillin. So before he would put on tefillin, he would think how holy tefillin are, how chashuv and kodesh they are, and how a person is only supposed to do what he has, his body's completely clean, and how the entire time you're wearing tefillin, you're not supposed to be distracted 1 minute from the tefillin, for 1 second from the tefillin. And then Asa would come to the conclusion that I'm not going to be able to do it properly, so I'm not going to be able to do it. I can't do it. If I can't do it properly, it's better off not to try to do the mitzvah of tefillin at all. And he would do this for every mitzvah. He would think about how elevated it is. He would think about how there's so many pratim, so many details in it that he's never going to do it right. And therefore he would say, I'm better off not doing it at all. And we see that this was his attitude from his sale of the Bechorah, of the firstborn rights, to Yaakov Avinu, right? Because Chazal tell us that when Yaakov wanted to buy the Bechorah, Esav asked him, what is this? What's the nature of this Bechorah that you speak of? And Yaakov said that, the Bechor is going to do the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, right? We know before the mice of the Egel, before the sin of the golden calf, the firstborns were supposed to do the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. After that, they lost that right, and it went to the Kohanim. So Yaakov says to him, one of the halachas of being a Bechor is you can't get drunk, because you can't get drunk and do the Avodah. And he told him other things. The Bechor is not just privileges. It also comes with obligations, right? And there's all kinds of things. A kohen has all kinds of rules. He can't become tamei. He can't let his hair grow. All kinds of things that a kohen has to do. So Esav says, I'm never going to be able to live up to that. So therefore, I don't want it. That's why he pushes it away. And he says, Lama zali b'chor. What do I need it for? And that's why. Says the Rabbi Lazar of Koznitz. He says that Rivka identifies Esav as Benah HaGadol, her child who has big hasagas, big thoughts. He only thinks of things in big ways. If I can't do the mitzvah completely at the level it deserves, I'm better off not doing it at all. He's a gadol. He thinks big. He only wants to do he's a perfectionist. He has big sheifas. He only wants to do things perfectly. He's a perfectionist. Now we know that the enemy of good is perfect, right? It doesn't work. If a person is a perfectionist, he's always going to be disappointed. But we, Yaakov's children, the Bnei Yisrael, we have to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not demand more than we're capable from us. And of course, mitzvahs have elevated. And of course, there's ideal ways to do mitzvahs. And of course, we're supposed to strive to do them as perfectly as possible. But we have to know that Hashem wants us to serve Him according to our abilities, according to our minds, with the tools that He gave us, and He understands that not every mitzvah is going to be done perfectly. I just have to be very careful. We have to just be very careful that this is not an excuse for anything. Of course, if a person can do it better, he has to do it better. But Hashem says that when a mitzvah comes to our hands, we have to make ourselves small, and we have to take this attitude that even if I can't do it 100% properly, it's hard for me. I can't have kavanah the entire davening from start to end. But even if I can't, I can have kavanah for part of it. So I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to have kavanah for that part of davening that I can. And even the tefillin, the example we used before, I'm not going to be able to not be distracted from it for 1 second, but I'm going to try as hard as I can to not be distracted as much as I can. But we chas v'shalom never say I'm not going to do the mitzvah. We do it the best way we can. And we know that for sure Hashem is going to be happy with that. Hashem is going to see that we've made a sincere effort, and Hashem is going to be very proud of us, right? And you see this even in modern parlance. A person, today, let's say for example, we have people are collecting money for all kinds of things. So somebody says, I can only afford to sponsor one bulletproof vest for the IDF, or I can only sponsor one pair of tzitzis. How's that going to make a difference? There's hundreds of thousands of soldiers that need these things. So, but if everybody took that attitude, we wouldn't get anything done. But we see that everybody doing their little part. We're changing the nature of chesed, the amount of chesed that's coming out. Each person only did a little bit, because that's what we're supposed to do. That's what Hashem wants of us. Each of you do your little part. Each of you do the best you can. So even though our kavanah and our abilities and our strengths and our skills are katan, they're small. They're smaller than what the mitzvah deserves. But that's why we're called katan. That's why the Torah considers katan. Rivka refers to Yaakov as the katan. He never was worried about the big picture. He just, in every situation, I'm going to do the best I can. Is it going to be enough? Is it going to get me there all the way? That's not my responsibility. I know what Hashem wants of me now. I'm going to do the best I can with this situation. And it's not up to me whether it's good enough or not. That's Hashem's department. And Hashem tells us it's more than good enough. That's all I want from you. I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I created human beings. I created you with flaws. You're not supposed to be perfect. But if you think of yourself as I'm going to do, even if my part is little, I'm proud that I could do my little part, then Hashem says that's amazing. That's really what godless is. So Esau considered himself gadol, I can't, and if I can't do it perfect, I may as well not do it at all. Ends up doing nothing. The one who says I'm either doing it all or I'm doing nothing ends up doing nothing because he can't do it all. You can't do it all. Asa became a Rasha because he held himself to too high of a standard. He didn't believe that Hashem cared about his little actions, and if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all, right? And so what does Rivka do? She takes the, what did the pasuk say? Vatikach Rivka is big day Esav b'no hagadol. She took these things of Esav. Esav had tremendous potential. The big day, the begadim of Esav, she took the mitzvahs that Esav should have enclosed himself in it. Vatalbesh es Yaakov b'no hakotan, and she gave them to Yaakov, the one who was willing to do whatever he had to do. That because he made himself small, and he said, okay, this is the best I can do, this is what I'm going to do. So she put that clothing that Esav should have been able to take, and she put that on Yaakov. She put it on Yaakov, and that would create a reach nichorach, the good smell that when he went into Yitzchak was a reach nichorach in front of Hashem. Yaakov Avinu, by saying I'm going to do what I can, even if it's small, I'm going to take on the mantle of Esav as well. Rivka clothes him in the mantle of Esav, and Hashem says, you now get all the brachas, because you recognize that I just want you to do your best effort. I'm not looking for. So we should all feel encouraged about this, because I know everybody's feeling we're not doing enough. And of course, this is not an excuse to not do more if you can. Of course, we should do as much as we can. But very often we get frustrated. We say, what can I do already? I'm doing a little bit that I'm trying to do to help soldiers, to daven, to this, but I wish I could do more. Okay, figure out if you can, but if you can't, know that that's what Hashem wants from you. That's what Hashem wants from us. So we should take these thoughts going into Shabbos, and Mitzvah Hashem, we should see the end of all the difficulties in Eretz Yisrael. We should see the Geula, Amitis B'mehera B'yameinu. I wish you all a great Shabbos.